Okay, so in this section, we're going to talk kind of stray off of the solving quadratic equations for just a little while because there's something else we need to know before we'll be ready to actually solve some equations. So I want to make sure that we know something called I. Now, here's what happened. If you've got a square root inside if you had a negative inside your square root, it's just not possible. If I'm talking about 36 people or negative 36, people will say, well, the square root of negative 36 is negative 6. But the problem is negative 6 squared is a positive 36. It's not really possible to get that negative inside the square root because anything squared is a positive number, not a negative. Now what happened is when in science they were going through and they were doing all their calculations and stuff, they started coming up with negatives inside the square root. And so they had to come up with a way to deal with them. And here's how they did that. Anytime you've got the square root of negative 1, they use the symbol I to represent that. So if you see square root of negative 1, you can use an I in its place. Now, if you've got the square root of negative 1 squared, that would be I squared, it's negative 1. Okay? Write these down, have them in your head. So here's how you take care of this negative here. It's like you've got negative 1 times 36. Now I can take the square root of 36. It's 6, right? And then square root of negative 1 is I. So 6I. Okay, so square root of 100, negative 100, would be 10I. The I basically represents that negative being inside the square root. Now, what about if you've got a number like 8 that's not a perfect square? So what I'm going to do is I'll go ahead and take care of the negative part with the I. So I, and then I've got square root of 8. But I can do better than square root of 8 because 8 is 4 times 2. I can take the square root of the 4. Square root of 4 is 2. I still got the I. This 2 is left inside. So 2I square root of 2. Now usually the I, as you can tell, I just put it here, they usually put it right in front of the square root, just because if you put it at the end, it's hard to tell if it's like inside the square root or kind of what you mean. So they usually put it right there. So let's simplify down one more like that and then we'll get a little bit bigger. Okay, now I'm going to take care of the negative here with an I. And 12 is 4 times 3, so 2 root 3. And then I need the I to take care of the negative. Now sometimes you'll see setups like this where they've got some of it's a real number, some of it's an imaginary number. So this is 3I plus 6. For whatever reason, standard form is to put the 6 first. So 6 plus 3I. Okay, this one's a little bit messier, but I think we can do it like we did some of the others. 18 is 9 times 2. So 3 root 2. Make sure you remember your I in there. And then remember, standard form is to put the real number part first, and then the I stuff. Okay, so let's just keep practicing these. They're getting a little bit different, a little bit more complicated as we go. So let me take care of the 8. We actually did this a second ago. So I have 2I root 2. 2I root 2. And I can multiply those together and get 6. Okay, now one thing I want you to be careful about is you can't say, well, 2 negatives make a positive here. You've got to take care of this square root before you deal with the negative on the outside. So I have this negative I'm bringing down. Square root of negative 36 is 6I. So I have the negative, the 6i, negative 6i. Okay, now when you are solving these, I'm going to solve this one using the square root method. So I'm going to go ahead and take the square root of both sides. So I can't do anything with the square root of 7, so I just have I root 7. Remember, if you're solving a quadratic, you will have two answers. So I root 7 and negative I root 7. Okay, let's do one more when we're solving. So I'm going to move the 36 to the other side of the equal sign and take the square root. So x equals plus or minus 6i. Okay, so here's kind of the basics. What we're going to do from here is we're going to go through and with imaginary numbers, we're going to add, subtract, and multiply. So let's start with adding and subtracting. Now, really all of this stuff is the reason why they decided to put things using the I. It's just because it makes it easy to treat it like it's a variable. So you can do things like combining like terms, FOILing, distributing. I'm sure there are things I'm not thinking about at the moment, but you can treat it like it's a variable. So here, when I'm adding, I'm just going to combine like terms. So 7 plus 1 is 8, 2i, and a negative 4i is a negative 2i. So there you go. Now, if you're subtracting, just make sure that you distribute out that negative, and then you can combine like terms. So negative 7 and 9 is 2, 5i and 11i is 16i. So this isn't too bad. I mean, stuff we've done before, it's just the i's an imaginary number. Okay, so let's multiply. Now we will have a couple of different kinds of multiplying here. You're just going to multiply like you normally would. So if I normally have this, that's 14i squared. Now here's where you want to be careful, because a minute ago I gave you a definition for I squared. I told you I squared equaled a negative 1. So I think I can replace that. Now this right here is the reason why scientists were getting imaginary numbers in their calculations. At some point, those imaginary numbers worked themselves out. They just needed a way to keep it separate in process. Okay, so a couple more. I'm going to distribute here. So I have negative 16i squared plus 56i. Two negatives make a positive. Alright, now the I squared is negative 1, so let me plug that in. And then this one's not squared, so I'm going to leave that I. So I'll have positive 16 plus 56i. Okay, getting a little bit bigger. If you look at this, doesn't this scream FOIL? That's exactly what we're going to do. So let's FOIL this thing together. So first, outside, inside, and last. And then I'm going to plug in my negative 1 there. So that's negative 15. So 24 minus 15 is 9. Negative 18 minus 20 minus 38i. Okay, let's do 2 more. So looking at this, I'm going to FOIL. So first, outside, inside, and last. Now you will notice that I'm going to get some canceling that happens here. Because if you look at these two, see how they're conjugates? Conjugates, you get some canceling to happen, so lucky us. I squared is negative 1, so negative 49 times negative 1, 2 negatives make a positive, and all I have left is 4 plus 49, which is 53. No i's involved here. Okay, last foiling one. I put this one on here for a reason. I want y'all to make sure to notice that this is like I have it written out 2 times. I have to make sure that I foil on this. So first, outside, inside, last. Okay, plug in -1 for the I squared, and I have 21 minus 20. And the last thing that we're going to do here is we're going to look at complex numbers. This isn't hard actually, you just need to know what you're looking at here. A minute ago we did something like this, square root of -64, it was 8i, right? Same thing, I can do this, 5i, and combine like terms, so 3i. Okay, now let me write out what I have here before I actually answer any question. So square root of -9 is 3i. And then we'll go through and foil this together. So first, outside, inside, and last. Okay, plug in -1 for the I squared, and I have 25 minus 9 is 16, and adding up the i's here, 30. Okay, now in our next 2 sections, we're going to do a little bit with combining our imaginary numbers with our solving equations. So that's why we kind of had to plug this in here, but you'll get a little bit more of this coming up.